A rising death toll and reports, unconfirmed, of soldiers going door to door to intimidate people. Zimbabwe is under meltdown and the president is nowhere to be seen. Emmerson Mnangagwa is in Russia and giving no sign that he's coming home anytime soon. Zimbabweans are begging South Africa to intervene after the violence fueled by a fuel price hike of 150% on Monday. People have been protesting. Social media and other internet services have been shut down. Let's go straight to Dumisani Muleya, the editor-in-chief of the Zimbabwe Independent, who is in Bulawayo. Good to have you with us, Dumisani. What is the situation at the moment and reports of a rising death toll? Dumisani, can you hear me? All right, we'll go back to Dumisani as soon as we can get him back up. Okay, so how did Zimbabwe get here? Zimbabweans are desperate for intervention from their neighbours. They've been battered and bruised by a complicated Robert Mugabe presidency, and their new president doesn't seem to be making things easier. It is evidence that the problem isn't Mnangagwa or Mugabe alone, and is leadership change there more than just a change in its president? To help us understand what's going on, we have Nqobizitha Mlilo, acting spokesperson for the MDC Alliance, political analyst at the University of Johannesburg, David Monyae, and Teldah Mawarire, advocacy and campaigns officer at the NGO Civicus and sister of the arrested pastor David Monyae. Thank you very much for joining us. What happened to your brother?
Well, he was picked up this morning. Police from the Law and Order section came to his house. They hung out for a little bit and then they picked him up. They took him to the Central Police Station. He's been charged with inciting public violence using social media, and he'll appear in court tomorrow. So tonight he will spend the night in a cell. And
was he inciting public violence?
Clearly, you just have to go to the videos that he has been circulating and been using for his activism to see that the core message that he preaches in each and every message is non-violence, peaceful protest. So we are also waiting keenly to see the evidence that the state will produce.
And why, if that is his message, why do you think they've arrested him? What sort of message is it to him and the rest of the country?
I think this is just an intimidation tactic. It is meant to send a message to all activists, who, not only Ivan, but those who are doing this sort of work. And we could see this from last night already when the state, on state TV, announced that certain NGOs and activists were terrorists, and that the state was keen to interview them. So this is definitely an intimidation tactic meant to silence those who are speaking out about the deteriorating economic and social conditions.
And we'll focus more on the repression a little later, but we've got Dumisani Muleya back up on the line, and I was trying to learn from you what's happening from a violence point of view and the rising death toll.
Yes, good evening. I would like to start probably not at the violence, but just in a couple of seconds, start at the genesis of the problem. Mm-hmm. The genesis of the problem that we are facing now is an unresolved constitutional issue. There was an unconstitutional takeover of power in 2017, then fast forward to an election last year in July. That election becomes disputed. Therefore, the big question that remains unresolved is the legitimacy problem. And then you add to that the economic problem. So when you put that together, that brings you to what is happening now. The fuel price increases, that is probably what you can call the Sarajevo moment, what triggered the protest. So when you take that continuum of events and the issues put together, that explains to you why with the violence that you're talking about. People call for the stay away. The reaction is predictable. There's violence on the state side, but also the protests themselves, they were very aggressive, violent in many ways. In Bulawayo, where I've been for a week, that has been the story. But the state's reaction was disproportionate, violence, but particularly the closure of the internet. That was uncalled for, needless, unnecessary. You don't react to that to problems that are deeply rooted. Closing the internet doesn't help anything.
Okay, so you're saying that this is inevitable considering the lead up to this and the elections. Let's talk a little
Yeah,
bit more.
it's inevitable. It's inevitable because, listen, in December 2017, after these guys, a month after they've taken over, we repeatedly pointed out, I remember an interview on November 18, 2017, during the process of the coup. I had an interview with you guys. You asked me, I expressed a completely different opinion in the middle of euphoria, all the singing and noise that was making, that is, let's talk again. I remember saying, let's talk again a year down the line. You will see what's happening. Nothing will have changed. At the very least, it will be worse. The reason is simple. This is not rocket science. The guys who created the crisis are the guys who are in power. You are not going to get anything different. It's just going to get worse.
Okay,
Because
and I mean, I know you ended up imprisoned as well. I mean, clearly it's, we're going to see an increase in this, considering the arrest today of the activists. I mean, how do you think this is going to play out now? And what should the president be doing, and when's he coming home?
Thank you. Good question. He shouldn't have left in the first place. You do not now announce a Sarajevo moment, jump out of the ship, run to Russia, and all those countries in Eastern Europe which are not going to give you money. The real issue is that he is trying to reform the state, the economy, while he is maintaining an authoritarian system. That is not going to work. He's going to Russia and all those republics in Eastern Europe which are not going to give money, of course, except money for himself and his cronies, but not money to fund the economy and reform things. He is not doing basics.
Okay.
The basics are the following. He must have stuck with the agenda of reform. He must have started showing that he has an intention to reform things, but he's talking and doing nothing.
Okay,
there are so many things he could have done which don't need money.
I'm going to jump in here because we're going to have to let you go. But I just, if you could just quickly update us very briefly, if you will, on the death toll. I mean, we're hearing 15. Can you confirm numbers here?
No, I don't have that numbers. I've seen various numbers ranging from 5 to 9 to 10 to 15. I do not know. In the morning here in Bulawayo, I went around. I managed to speak to police at Bulawayo Central Police Station to just say, how many people do you know to have died in this protest so far? One guy there, a Masuku policeman, he says to me that, well, we are hearing 10. But I had heard different numbers, so I can't confirm anything. All I know is that in Bulawayo today, this afternoon, 32 people appeared in court in connection with violence and looting. These are protesters. This is a reaction from the state. They've been remanded in custody to Friday. Okay,
Dumisani, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much for that. Nqobizitha, I mean, what are you hearing about what's going down at the moment, and what do you make of the genesis of the problem there?
No, I think what Dumisani has been saying is absolutely correct, and what has happened so far confirms what we've always said about this regime. It's a fascist regime, it's a barbaric regime, it's a vampirish regime. They are murderers, they are looters. That's what they are. They don't deserve to be in positions of leadership of a decent people and a peace-loving people like the people of Zimbabwe. This state is a military state. Zimbabwe has been militarized, and what we are seeing now is a culmination or a dramatization of the crisis of legitimacy. We went to an election on the 30th of July. The MDC and President Nelson Chamisa won this election. Emmerson Mnangagwa stole this election. And to the extent that Mr. Mnangagwa does not have a social contract with the majority of the Zimbabwean people, he will not be able to run the country. So our position is very simple. One, we don't recognize Mr. Mnangagwa as a legitimate president of the Republic of Zimbabwe. To the extent, and as such, he must go. And to the extent that he thinks that he's the president of Zimbabwe, we think that it is appropriate for him at this time to resign. Having resigned, there must be a national transitional authority which has a specific mandate of achieving 3 specific things.
Okay, hold on a second, David. I mean, that's not going to happen, is it?
Not at all.
No.
And I think we also have to understand that this goes beyond the president, whether it was President Robert Mugabe and now President Mnangagwa. This is a systemic challenge that Zimbabwe confronts, and it needs to go just beyond an individual analysis to deal with the crisis much more holistically. Firstly, the elections in which MDC participated in, they played the game. They've been in a government of national unity with the ruling party. They helped to come up with the current constitution. So the issue for me is that Zimbabweans need to speak and listen to each other. The idea that there's a Britain, there's United States, there's a South Africa or SADC or the AU coming to help Zimbabwe, there's no such a thing. This crisis will be resolved by Zimbabweans speaking among themselves.
Okay, just pause there for a moment, because Zimbabweans in South Africa protested in Pretoria today, just to confirm your point, pleading with the government for help.
South African is the host of the SADC. So we are appealing to the president of South Africa and South Africa citizens as a whole, just to have hospitality with Zimbabweans, to march, rally behind us, and also to forcefully engage our Zimbabwean government on this crisis that we are facing today.
Do people really see that as a solution to this? I mean, how can it help?
It's an important part of the solution, because, you know, I think the complaint has always been that civil society and other Zimbabweans are docile and are not taking ownership of the problem. And I think they have, and we can see what the response has been. South Africa has got considerable economic clout in the region, and therefore should have considerable...
Note our ongoing silence.
Yes, and also we saw the statement from the Department of International Relations last night, and how disappointing that was. So, including not only from the government, but we need solidarity, regional solidarity from other civil society organizations. The protests in Zimbabwe were led by the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions. We would like to see other players as big as COSATU, who are in an alliance here with the government and have got some sort of power to be pushing their colleagues in the ANC to say this cannot continue and this is a security risk in the region. So I think it's part of the solution. Solidarity is not entirely the solution, but it is part of getting where we want to go.
I mean, it'll certainly help, because it's so fractured, isn't it? I mean, even the MDC Alliance and what it stands for is a problem in itself. I mean, are you giving Zimbabweans enough of a vote from the opposition? I mean, can it make a difference? Much of a voice, rather?
I'm not sure what you mean by saying that the MDC itself is a problem. This
MDC
is
Alliance.
The MDC Alliance. This is a political party that participated in an election and won that election, and has consistently won those elections at least 2000. The MDC is an indispensable force in the Republic of Zimbabwe, and it is the undisputed leader of the people of Zimbabwe. So no solution to Zimbabwe can be found without the involvement of the MDC. Therefore, that is why we are calling on SADC and the African Union, because Zimbabwe remains an African problem that requires an African solution. And that is also why we are calling on the South African government, given the geopolitical importance of South Africa and given the power of South Africa on the African continent, to drag Emmerson Mnangagwa and his cowards to the negotiating table, screaming and shouting, to achieve the objective that I've indicated, that there must be a transitional authority. That transitional authority must achieve three things. The first thing is that stabilize the economy immediately so that our people can have reprieve. There must be political and institutional reform. And thirdly, that transitional authority must then prepare the country to a free and fair election. Earlier on, you said you don't see that as possibility. The rest, the African continent was under colonial rule for a very long time, and people dismissed the possibility of the African child being independent. The same is true of Zimbabwe. However difficult the situation might be now, we are very confident that we are on the verge of a breakthrough, and it is important that our fellow brothers and sisters on the African continent come to our aid. This is our moment.
And the president, he's not there. I mean, what sort of message is that, and why is he hiding away?
I think it tells us two things. Firstly, overconfidence, that he's in control of the army, and MDC can demonstrate in urban areas where they have massive support base, the army will be able to deal with, as we see happening. But on the other hand, there is a move on President Mnangagwa's approach since the elections, that he needs to reach the international community. I think he has been to Western countries and now former Eastern Russia. And Russia, it's an oil-producing country. One does not really know what kind of deals in which Russia would also want to play a critical role on the African continent. There's absolutely nothing wrong in him being there. It's just
the timing,
a timing that
awkward.
in itself is awkward, and one would expect him to come back home and take a lead, particularly with the opposition, to deal with the economic issues.
The way he's handling it is by making these arrests, clamping down on social media. I mean, that's quite a powerful message, isn't it? That we can go in there, stop you from talking. I mean, you wonder what the paranoia is.
It really is an unsavory thing to do, and for us the biggest worry is that this form of silence, what happens under this cover of silence, where people cannot see what is going on. And you know, it's a violation of freedom of expression. It's meant to silence people. It's going on to ordinary people as well, and not only those who are activists. But I suppose we can see from the African continent, the rest of the continent, that the human resolve for the need to be free and to want human dignity is unbreakable, really. So eventually, in the long run, a solution has to be found. This sort of clamping down is certainly not the way to go, and it will not make issues go away.
And it also makes you wonder why, and I'd obviously like to hear your viewpoint here, why people continue to vote for the ZANU party.
Well, that's the mystery that is there. That is not true. The MDC, like I've indicated earlier on, has won elections since 2000. The critical issue has been, it's not who votes that matters, it's who counts the votes that matters. So the electoral environment has been uneven. So elections have been stolen at least since 2000. But 2018 created its own dynamic in the sense that once you live in a dictatorship and you start introducing some modicum of reform, you have started a process that you cannot control. So Mr. Mnangagwa appeared to create himself as a reformist. His reforms did not go far enough.
Saying all the right things, wasn't he?
Absolutely. His reforms did not go far enough for some of us who want a democratic state. But his reforms went too far for those in the system. And therefore, he's unable to balance these two. So it is not true that the ZANU-PF has been winning elections. It is not true that Mr. Mnangagwa has been, or Mr. Mugabe or Mr. Mnangagwa has been winning elections. Zimbabweans have been very clear.
No, but I was asking more about the appeal of ZANU-PF. I mean, is it a party that people feel that they can benefit from because of the cronyism in government? And also, does this suggest that Mnangagwa is no different from Robert Mugabe? I mean, he was there throughout most of his leadership.
And quite a number of members within MDC were part of the very same liberation movement. And I think what we are seeing is that ZANU-PF has a very strong Pan-African appeal and ideology, and they've played on it well. And beyond that, they control the state, something that they have abused, and the violence itself. There's been challenges. Some of us have witnessed the elections, observed them, and you could see challenges that are there. But for us to say the elections, all of them were stolen, particularly this one, it's also quite problematic. They might have been here and there challenges, but ZANU-PF remains a force, and therefore one would then say you cannot have an MDC government in Zimbabwe without ZANU-PF, and similarly a ZANU-PF go it alone. It will be difficult. That's why there's a need for the two parties to realize that there's a need to come together, have a comprehensive package to deal with the economy firstly. A number of Zimbabweans have left the country. You need those highly educated people with skills. United States is in a crisis as we speak, and those days of calling upon United States to intervene are gone. The current president in the U.S. is not in the game of democracy. Similarly, Theresa May, she might be gone by tomorrow. There's a crisis in Britain. Similarly, South Africa has challenges. So that means Zimbabweans have to really figure out that they need to demonstrate and demand rights, but at the same time discuss and resolve this matter quite quickly.
I mean, do you think that's possible? And also, how possible is it living under the present-day circumstances with the 150% fuel hike. I mean, what sort of impact is that likely to?
So just before I say that quickly, I think we really have to be careful, to my compatriots here, Mlilo and David, that we should not see Zimbabwe totally as black and white, that everyone is either MDC or ZANU-PF. That is not the case. There's a lot of people who don't belong to either side and who also need to be brought, and who need to be brought to the negotiating table. They are Zimbabweans, they have interests, civil society, ordinary citizens, who are maybe non-partisan or belong to other forms of groupings who should not be left out of that. As for how possible is it to survive in Zimbabwe at the present moment if we go ahead with this 150% fuel increase? It's almost impossible, because even before this, people were not coping already. In January, I was in Zimbabwe. I met a woman who was crying in a shop for buying uniforms because she couldn't afford the uniform for her grade 1 daughter. So that sort of desperation where people now, those who are working at least, will be in a position where they are having to subsidize the state or their employers if they are civil servants for transportation and so forth. I mean, people have been stretched already, and people have cut, some have cut meals to 1 meal, some are skipping meals, some have taken children out of school. So it's really unsustainable, and it's not possible to keep on surviving with such economic conditions.
I mean, it really is a terrible picture, isn't it? We're going to leave it there. Teldah Mawarire, please tell us what happens about your brother. Good luck with that, and inform us about what's going to happen there. Nqobizitha Mlilo and David Monyae, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
What does a lighter skin colour get you? Some believe beauty and greater opportunities, but the danger is enormous. And then we have a former master chef in the kitchen with tips on how to become a culinary expert.